Eric Brooks, you ready? All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Rotary Club of Lexington, March 13th, 2025 meeting here for the Pledge Four-Way Test and Inspiration. Eric Brooks.
Thank you, Brett. Good afternoon. Let us start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And the four-way test, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendship? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Please be seated. I am pleased to see so much blue out there. It is game day in the bluegrass, and we embark on yet another SEC tournament. I think with a meaningful chance of winning at least a game. So go Cats. I'll be watching. I hate 9:30 starts. That's not going to be pleasant, but we'll do what we got to do. But I'm minded to think back to 5 years ago today, March 13th, 2000. On that day, on that morning, by that morning, 9 a.m., unfortunately, the SEC had canceled the SEC men's basketball tournament before UK had even played a game. The NCAA had by that time canceled both the men's and women's basketball tournaments, and it felt as though the world would end. It's a very sad morning. And on that morning, when we came into work at Ashland, our tour coordinator reached out to our executive director to inform him that a goodly percentage of our docents had contacted her and said, we don't feel safe doing tours. We're not going to come in for a while. So she wanted to know what we were going to do. So we gathered as a staff in the mansion at Ashland. And we had a conversation and concluded very quickly that without the volunteers, it would be difficult to move forward. That in reality, given the magnitude of things that had already happened, that it seemed the best course to go ahead and shut down. So that is what we did. At the end of that day, Ashland closed its doors and did not reopen them for almost 3 months. And when we opened only exclusively on an exterior basis. We did tours on the grounds for about a month. Then we managed to move back into the house. So that was a huge decision. And obviously, I think we all remember the feelings that we felt at that time, the uncertainty, the fear, just the sheer concern about were we going to be okay. And it was a very difficult time. I mean, my boss worked very, very hard to ensure that we never had to lay anyone off, that we got paid, that we got through it. It was a very frightening time. And I'm minded to think about in the short run after that, some of the things that we learned to do. Wear masks when we left our houses. stand 6 feet apart if we had to be anywhere near anyone, and not to gather in any more than a group of, say, 10 or less. We made sacrifices for the benefit of the greater good. And we were willing to do that because we saw it as necessary. And that remained the case for a while. That pandemic drug on for over a year. And its effects continue. They didn't end when the pandemic ended. I learned that this year in a very real and frightening way. On January 28th, I was having my lunch, my Jimmy John's sub at Ashland, reading a book, when I suffered a stroke. And that was brought about in no small part, perhaps, to the fact that I had COVID last year. I've had it twice, maybe 3 times. The first time was before they had even announced the pandemic or there was any way to test for it. Sadly, I was not feeling well, but I had a ticket to senior night at UK, Rupp Arena, and I was not going to miss senior night, sick or not sick. So I went to senior night. So I hope I didn't spread COVID, but I was there. But that became very real to me when I suffered that stroke. Fortunately, I made a pretty much full recovery, but it was a very scary feeling, one that I hope I will not repeat. And it caused me to think about the fragility of life and the immediacy of life. We aren't guaranteed tomorrow or any number of tomorrows. And it's caused me to think a great deal about the need to do today what I want and need to do today, because I don't know whether there will be a tomorrow. It has caused me to think more about valuing the people around me, because I don't know how much more time I have with them or they with me. We have to love one another. We have to tell one another that we love one another. We have to care about each other more than we care about ourselves. We are right now in a state in our country where we have forgotten that. We are not properly caring about the whole, the greater good, more than the individual good. And it will not end well if this does not change. If we don't live up to the test we have set before ourselves, we will face serious and dramatic consequences. We already are. That's what I'm reminded to think about on this March 13th, 5 years from the day that Ashland shut down.
Glad you're feeling better, Eric. Thank you. How many Zoom members do we have? I'd like to welcome the 10 Zoom members. Thank you for being here. Thank you all for being here, and here to introduce our guests, Mr. Mike Baker.
President. Hello, everybody. It's been a while since I've done this. We have no visiting Rotarians. We have no Rotaracts, but we have 3 very important guests. And when I call your name, please stand up. Tommy Hutchins is a guest of Marcus Cross. Where are you, Tommy? There you go, back there. Larry Spell is a guest of Sean Lyons. Where are you, Larry? There he is, right there. And Jeremy Bailey is a guest of Andy Brett. There you are. Welcome to Rotary. Have a great day.
Thank you very much. And now for the lottery, Margaret. And I'm going to pull out 2 names. First name, or first number, and I'm going to pull out another one. In the event the first person doesn't win. 3980, 3980. $969. 3980 going once. 3980 going twice. Hey, we got one. Next number in the event we don't win is 3983. What? And I even went in and fished around. That is a mathematical improbability. All right. And we're looking for the, we're looking for the, it's not, it was the, I believe the Jack of Hearts, was it? And you get your $2. Hey, wow. When was the last time that happened? That's amazing. Congratulations. I would buy a lottery ticket if I were you. Celebrating birthdays, Gordon Patterson. Jenny Schnurr, Jake Graves, Jim Pope, Brandon Farley, Amanda Huddleston, Laura Mobley Korn. Is it Matt Gobble or Goebel? Matt Goebel, Jim Martin, and Dan Miller. On three, happy birthday to you. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Don't forget the birthday club. Announcements, St. Patrick's Day Parade on Saturday. Join us to walk as a Rotary group. Let's have fun. Bring your families and friends to walk behind the big Rotary banner. We'll have giveaways to pass out. We're going to meet at 12:45 at the Thoroughbred Park on the corner of Midland and Main at 12:45. Now, if you attend, you have to sign a waiver. And Alicia, you have that waiver? So in addition to signing the waiver, if you'd like to join us, I'm going to buy the first round of wherever we go after the parade. So please join us on the St. Patrick's Day Parade. All right. Miracle League opening day. Come out to Shiloh Park, and the first pitch that I'll be throwing is at 10 a.m. with games until 2. And if you want to volunteer, please reach out to Eileen O'Brien, if you've not been before, it is an amazing event. You get to really see some kids that you have a heart for. It's really one of the special things Rotary does. You feel like you're really making a difference in the community. I highly recommend you attending the Miracle League opening day. Now, here to introduce our newest Rotarian. One of my favorite points of all the announcements is Liz. Are you here, Liz? Yep. Oh, there. Of course you are. Liz Fowler to introduce our newest Rotarian.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I am really proud to introduce you to Cassie Klein. Cassie Klein is an amazing young professional that embodies so many of Rotary's values: goodwill, service, integrity, just to begin to talk about her. She is a Kentucky graduate, so she'll be cheering on the Cats tonight. She's currently enrolled in a MHA program at Eastern Kentucky University, and she has been a team member at Bluegrass Care Navigators for the past 4 years. She is in the current role of Associate Director of Philanthropy. So please join me in welcoming Cassie to the team.
Get a picture? In front of the road, just off stage. Yep. Yep. Thank you. Welcome, Cassie and Margaret, to introduce our very newest Rotary member.
I also go by Peggy. I also go by Patty, but that's another story. I'd like to introduce Andrea, but she goes by Andy Bryan, and I met her through Susie Basham, who was going to introduce her today, but couldn't be here. Andy sent a little bit about herself to Susie. I'm just going to briefly summarize. She was an elementary school teacher, and then she went to work in the tech industry, and I believe all of this has been in Lexington. And now she's in marketing with Paul Davis Restoration. She likes to read and spend time with her dogs, and she likes to do creative things. So that's awesome for this club. I met Andy at International Book Project. She wasn't even a member. She was kind of on our radar, but she had already served at the Backpack. She'd been at the Morning Mixers. And then I met her at the International Book Project service that we did. So I know she's gonna be a huge part of this club. She's already got the heart for it. And we'd like to welcome you.
Picture. One, two. Andy, welcome to the Rotary Club of Lexington. Number 8. You know, it's the last week of winter. That about this time next week, we'll be turning into spring. You may have noticed the daffodils, some of the tulips are coming up. The changing of seasons, always an exciting time. And membership, we just introduced 2 new members. Membership is the most important component of the Rotary Club. Our members are who we are. And I did a little number crunching, and looks like we're unfortunately losing more members each year than we're gaining. And we've got a remedy for that. We've got a pretty significant initiative that we're going to be putting forward, something different than we've done. Many of you were here a couple of weeks ago when Dylan launched into some of that discussion. We're going to be back on the 27th, last Thursday of this month, to talk about that in detail. But it's super important for our budget. 2 things need to happen. One, we need to have a system, a business development type engagement strategy for membership. Something that is scalable, that nurtures people that we meet and continues on and scales at levels that we aspire to. And secondly, we need to have a culture where we want everyone we meet to be a Rotarian. So I encourage all of you, when you meet someone, ask them to a meeting, ask them to attend, ask them if they're familiar with Rotary, evangelize. We need membership, super critical. It's cornerstone. We're at a crossroads where we're gonna have to decide, are we a medium-sized club or are we a club that was founded in 1915 that is a large club getting ready to host the large club conference in a couple of years? And to a person, everyone I speak to says, we're a large club, so we need everyone's help. Membership is something we can all do. In addition, and then lastly, before we're gonna introduce our exciting speaker today, Laurel's getting ready for her 26 year. Laurel, can you believe we're just 3.5 months ready before you take the reins and the baton? And I promised her I would leave it better than I found it. It was hard to do because Kim did such a good job. But Laurel is really looking at filling out and creating a robust teams of committees, making sure that everybody's involved. So you'll see some communication in the next number of weeks or so that's going to give everybody an opportunity. There's brand new committees, there's new opportunities to get involved. You could be, a couple hours a week, or you could be a leader that takes a brand new committee to new heights over the years. Really, we need all of you. So Laurel will be sending out that communication. Thank you for everybody who's been involved, and welcome to everybody who's getting ready to get involved. Thank you. All right. And now for our speaker, I'd like to introduce brand new red badge coming up to the podium to introduce our speaker from Sweden, Dana. Thank you.
Honor. So, when Laurel contacted me about introducing our speaker today, she had no idea how meaningful this was going to be to me. We are about to hear the incredible work taking place through Sanders Brown here in Lexington related to Alzheimer's. And some of you in the room may actually know my father-in-law, Gene Stefaniak Sr., and he is currently battling Alzheimer's. So this is very personal to me, and I suspect very personal to many other people in the room as well. So it's a true honor to do this introduction today. So I am here to introduce Dr. Maj-Linda Selencia. She is the Assistant Professor and Associate Director of Outreach and Partnerships as part of the Department of Molecular and Cellular Biochemistry. She, of course, is with the Sanders Brown Center on Aging with the College of Medicine at the University of Kentucky. She is here today to present to us current and future strategies in dementia, how scientists at Sanders Brown Center on Aging, UK, lead the way in combating Alzheimer's disease. She will be presenting the research going on in her laboratory and present the work that Sanders Brown, a national leading institute in Alzheimer's disease, is doing right here in Lexington. I'm sure it's going to spark many exciting conversations and lots of good questions. At the University of Kentucky, Sanders Brown on Aging, basic and clinical scientists work together to improve the health of older adults in Kentucky and beyond through research dedicated to understanding the aging process and age-related brain diseases. Sanders Brown provides education, outreach, and clinical programs that promote healthy brain aging. Over the past 3 decades, Sanders Brown has flourished and has emerged as one of the nation's leading centers on aging. The major foci, that was a new word for me, of the center are basic and applied research in Alzheimer's disease and related neurodegenerative disorders. An integral part of the Sanders Brown is the National Institute on Aging funded University of Kentucky Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. Over the past 30 years, this center has developed a vigorous program in clinical, neuropathological, educational, and research aspects of Alzheimer's disease that serves as a critical resource for the university, community, state, and nation. Currently, only 30 designated Alzheimer's disease research centers exist in the U.S. In 1985, Sanders Brown was among the first 10 ADCs funded by the NIH and has been continuously funded since the designation was launched. Dr. Selencia is an assistant, shared that with you, but I'm going to share it again. Dr. Selencia is an assistant professor at Sanders Brown. She was the recipient of a $125,000 grant from the CART Fund in 2020 for her research. CART stands for Coins for Alzheimer's Research Trust. And it is a grassroots effort created by Rotary clubs to provide, to provide cutting edge research to help find a cure for Alzheimer's. You can learn more or donate at www.cartfund.org. And I'm sure by the end of this, we will all be inspired to do that. It is my true honor and privilege to introduce Maj-Linda.
Well, hello everyone, and I was told to say in Swedish as well, so it's hejsan. It's truly a pleasure being here. Thank you for that introduction. You summarized everything that I'm about to tell you guys about, so thank you so much for understanding where this effort is. And yes, I'm here today, in case you're wondering why, is because I was very much honored by that grant from CART, the Coins for Alzheimer's Research Trust, and really build that community feeling for me and understanding. I actually went there to give a talk several times and seeing what the Rotary clubs around that particular area did for Alzheimer's disease, but also it made me under this kind of associate director for community and partnerships to reach out and ask the question, where is the Rotary Club of Lexington? And can we come here and present the work that we do in Alzheimer's disease and present Sanders Brown, which is truly one of the national, international valor. So I'll start with, you did your own. That is, it's a good question. Thanks.
Hey.
We got it. So I'll start with presenting Sanders Brown, and I learned by conversing with few of you that it's truly a center that many of you might know and recognize. It was, it opened in 1979, and that was through the, does he have a pointer as well? Through the activity of Dr. Bill Marksbury, a Kentucky native, an MD that came back to Kentucky to contribute to the community and brain health of Kentucky. He got donation from Colonel Highland Sanders and Johnny Brown Jr., which actually donated to open Sanders Brown. And that was 1979, another key moment. Dr. Marksbury, and some of you might have heard his name, actually focused on some of the subjects that even today are important for research. But another very interesting fact for Dr. Marksbury is that he started what is called UK ADRC, which stands for Alzheimer's Disease Research Centers. And his thinking was very revolutionary and progressive at that point, because he realized that in order to study the disease, you have to know the healthy brain and you have to understand the processes in the healthy brain. So he started this ADRC, this center that actually was built in understanding the community healthy brain, and asked their patients to donate those healthy brains for us to understand the research of a healthy aging and then Alzheimer's disease. Many things have happened through the years from 1979. We have a very active research, and I'm going to talk through it, but I just wanted to introduce also the current director for the Sanders Brown Center on Aging, which is Dr. Linda Van Eldik. She's a neuroscientist, a well-renowned neuroscientist that is doing fantastic work for maintaining the center's value. Some of the focus that we have in the center is neuroinflammation, dementia, and again, the first things that I'm going to incorporate through my presentation here, the genomic, the changes in the gene, our lifestyle. So we do a lot on the lifestyle and healthy aging, as well as we do research on Alzheimer's disease, as well as vascular dementia, and I might touch upon it as well. I don't know if you guys know this, but Sanders Brown is a hidden gem in the heart of Lexington, and I say so because we truly were one of the 10 national centers, ADRC centers in the country. More and more states have now built their own ADRCs, but we are right in the heart of Lexington. It's not always that we are recognized locally as much as we are recognized nationally and internationally. And Dana mentioned it, that is one of the original 10 centers that was founded by National Institute of Aging and NIH. We have been founded since 1985. In fact, we're celebrating the 40 years in 2025 of being in Alzheimer's Disease Research Center that is being continually funded by NIH for our work. And there are 36 centers through the country. The focus, as I mentioned a little bit, is not just the research. We actually truly ask basic research questions in collaboration with the clinical research, with the bedside, to make our research translational to the need of the patients and the community at large. And yes, again, the focus is to improve the health of the Kentuckians, but also beyond, because Alzheimer's disease is a global issue. We do focus on Alzheimer's disease and dementia. We have vascular dementia as well, and as well as look at risk factors such as the Down syndrome. We look at stroke, traumatic brain injury, inflammation, genetic, and lifestyle, as I mentioned. But if we were to take a step back, and we all talk about Alzheimer's disease, it's important to understand that Alzheimer's disease is a kind of dementia. So dementia is that big umbrella that affects our brain. And under it, we have Alzheimer's disease, which, yes, accounts for 60 to 80% of the cases with dementia. But we also have vascular dementia, Lewy body dementia that affects a bit more Parkinson's disease and like, and frontotemporal dementia that we actually, and this is kind of on the lower end, but frontotemporal dementia affects people of a younger age, 45, 50, and that has some other implications for families and communities and society at large. So all of it is important. And we have understood that in a center, and we have efforts, research efforts, clinical research efforts to cover this big umbrella of dementia. So some of the stats, and it really takes for all of us a bit of pause to think that nearly 7 million Americans are living with Alzheimer's disease. And we know that that is a cost of $360 billion to the research or to the cure, to the prevention of this disease, as well as is a cost that I think we often perhaps underestimate of the caregivers, because for every Alzheimer's disease patient, there is a family member, several family members that give that that care, and that is a $347 billion cost. And let's not forget that this is the 5th leading cause of death. I actually had a graph that is not showing up here to show how we've been so successful of combating several diseases, and that includes HIV, heart diseases, cancer. And yet, if that graph was to show there, you'd see that Alzheimer's disease is still a disease that we haven't cured yet. And that is one of the top 10, I say here, of no effective therapies. And that is one of the focuses that we have in our daily laboratory work, to find preventative and disease modifying therapies for Alzheimer's disease. And if we were to look a bit closer where it hits home in Kentucky, you're going to see that in 2024, it's 80,000 people, Kentuckians with Alzheimer's disease. That is roughly 11% of the populations that have Alzheimer's disease. AD caregivers in Kentucky are 157 people that are caregivers, and that is unpaid care roughly of $302 million. The value of unpaid care for our society, for our communities, is $4.8 billion. And I could go on with the numbers, but nevertheless, the statement really is that this is not just a personal problem. This is a community problem. This is a social problem for our communities to grow and cure and prevent Alzheimer's disease. And again, we're talking just Alzheimer's disease numbers here. If we were to put the other parts of dementia, Alzheimer's is just part in that picture, these numbers go radically up if we were to include all the dementia types. I wanted to introduce this graph, and some of you might have seen it, but we all have experience with age, that normal aging, that forgetting certain things. If you look at this graph, what it's really showing is that it's normal with age to have this kind of normal cognitive decline. As we age, that is normal. But where it becomes a problem is when we actually start seeing this preclinical stage of Alzheimer's disease, which is called a silent phase, when you actually changes in a brain without necessarily having to measure them as an individual or as a family member. Then we have this other stage when your cognition starts really changing, where you kind of see the cognitive changes are a problem now for the family. There are several domains in the brain that are affected, but you still have this preserved activity of daily activities. And then once you hit a threshold, you have this mild to moderate and then severe dementia. This is where the cognition is very much impaired. It interferes with your daily lives. This is also the area where the doctors start diagnosing the patients from MCI to mild. This is mild cognitive dementia, by the way. This is the area when now the physicians start diagnosing for dementia and Alzheimer's disease. So this is what's going on in Alzheimer's disease. This is a normal brain, and this is an advanced Alzheimer's disease brain. And if you look at the comparison, you see this kind of 20% reduction in the brain shrinkage. So what does it mean? Why is the brain shrinkage? Well, that is where your neurons in the brain die and the volume of the brain shrinks because of it. And if we look at the certain areas of the brain, again, half of this is half a healthy brain, and the other half is the advanced Alzheimer's disease brain. You have changes in the frontal cortex. This is where the executive decisions are made. You have changes in this area here that is called hippocampus. This is where your memory and your cognition, all your memory is stored in your learning paradigm. And that's why the Alzheimer's disease patients, right, or they lose their memory, is because these neurons in this particular area of the brain are dying, as well as you have changes in this ventricular space as is shown. This is where the fluids in the brain move in and out of the brain. So those are the three big regions in the brain that get affected that then have physiological and impact on the patient's daily activities, from memory to executive decisions, to anxiety, to depression, and everything else that these patients experience. And I'm going to introduce this because I may actually talk about some of those proteins, but Alzheimer's disease was really diagnosed 120 years ago, and I might do the math wrong, from Alois Alzheimer's, a German doctor that had a patient, 56-year-old Augusta Deter, that actually had Alzheimer's disease in early ages. And when this doctor looked at the brain autopsy, he found those two proteins that I'm going to talk about. Extracellular amyloid plaques. And these are the plaques that are formed outside the neuron, but still in the brain. It's like tombstones of this protein that just gets accumulated and it's very sticky. I've worked with my PhD on this protein. I know how sticky it is, and it kills neurons. And then he also identified this other protein, which is called tau. And this protein instead is inside the neuron. This is actual a picture of a human neuron, and this is this protein. These black dots are this human neuron that accumulates inside the neuron. It's called tau again, and it kills the neuron. It kills it from outside inside. In the end, when Alzheimer's disease is that severe and that advanced, you're going to see only this part of the neuron. The rest of the neuron has died. And this is another picture of these plaques that I mentioned before, again, outside of the neuron forming these tombstones. So that was already found from this doctor in Germany. This is the proteins that we have studied with Alzheimer's disease research for 100 and some years, and we have several hypotheses, and we have tried to understand and have developed therapies to target these two proteins. The research, though, has developed, and we now approach this as a multi-dementia. We don't approach Alzheimer's disease only with those two proteins. We did this for 100 years. We understand there are several factors, and I wanted to present some of the research that we're doing in my own laboratory, as well as across Sanders Brown, to approach Alzheimer's disease as a multi-etiology dementia, as a mixed dementia with several factors behind it. So these are people in my lab, actually, all young people, dynamic, very, very committed to the research, from undergrads to technicians to grad students and postdocs. And what we look at is exactly what I said. We actually look at this tau protein that I happen to mention, and this other protein that is called TDP-43, and we want to look at both proteins and how they affect Alzheimer's disease. And soon I'll present for you why we look at this other protein as well. We want to see how those two proteins change in a basic level, the cellular function, the biological function, how they interact with each other, how they contribute to disease that is more severe than if you looked at only one protein. And in the end of the day, because we are in Sanders Brown and we work with clinical research and neurologists and doctors that see the patients, and I know some of you know, we want to make our research translational that actually benefits those patients. And that's where we try to look at pharmacological and other approaches as therapies for Alzheimer's disease and related dementias. So there we are. I said that Alzheimer's disease is a mixed dementia. It's not only those two proteins that Dr. Alzheimer's Louis identified. In fact, all of it contributes to Alzheimer's disease. From inflammation, neuroinflammation in our cases. I talked about gut, or with Brett, about gut and microbiome. We know now that gut is not a separate organ from the brain. Actually, there are communication, and a healthy gut benefits Alzheimer's, not preventing Alzheimer's disease, but also benefit to have a healthy gut if you are sick. Some of those proteins that I talked about, the plaques, the tau, genetic factors. We do know that certain genetic factors, such as this ApoE4 that I was in this picture, actually can increase a certain form of that gene, can increase the risk for Alzheimer's disease by 4-fold. What it means, those are the patients that also get the disease much earlier, because we do know that Alzheimer's is an age disease. In the end of the day, age is the main risk factor. But if you have the genetic factor, then that speeds up the disease symptoms much earlier. The patients are much younger as well. We have changes in how the brain actually utilizes glucose. So to eat, the brain utilizes 20% of our glucose. And as the disease progresses, those cells that are associated with making the energy of our brain actually get also impaired. So we also have misuse of glucose in our brain. Oh, that way. So when I say that AD is a mixed dementia, this is the mixed dementia of AD. You have diseases such as, I'll start with kind of diseases and talk about proteins outside, but you have Alzheimer's disease that we mentioned. We have other mixed dementias that have a little bit of everything. You have Lewy body dementia, you have frontal temporal dementia, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about this late disease that was actually diagnosed right here in Sanders Brown and the neurologist Peter Nelson. And as those diseases develop and progress, these proteins on the outside of the circles, those are the proteins that now it's not just one of them, it's 4 of them. And every patient that has this picture of mixed dementia in the brain will have all these 4 proteins that are very, very detrimental for the function of the neuron in the brain. And here we have tau that is inside of that neuron in the brain. And here we have my favorite protein, TDP-43, which actually forms these inclusions right in the center, in the organelle of the neuron. So this is a picture that we as researchers have worked for years now. I believe in 2010 it was reviewed and we keep reviewing it. So we know, as I mentioned, those proteins, we do know that the first pathology that shows up is this plaques. The protein is called amyloid beta. You might have heard about it. These plaques show first. You have this decline in cognition, and those are where the first symptoms arise. So again, you have the plaques, that protein and plaques that forms, and you have the first symptoms. Then you start seeing the brain activity going down. You have this accumulation of this other protein tau that I keep mentioning that is inside the neurons that also start increasing. And then you start having dementia diagnosis, and that's where things go really bad. You have that brain shrinkage. It's called atrophy, but it is a brain shrinkage. The memory decline, obviously, you are in the full dementia mode at that point. But what this picture misses, or it's not by design, it's just that the research has evolved so much the last 5 years, is this TDP-43 protein that I studied in my own laboratory. And what we found, and other researchers across the country have found, is that the presence of this protein, this TDP-43 protein, actually can make the amyloid beta and tau worse. It can make the decline in cognitive so much worse than each of them by themselves. And we know that now. There is, oh wow. So I mentioned that tau is inside the neurons, but what we do right now in a clinic is that we measure this amyloid beta, we measure tau, we measure neurodegeneration, and then cognition. And there are, the research has actually gone so much forward that we can measure them in the blood. Right now, there are companies that can measure the levels of these proteins in the blood to show that you truly have Alzheimer's disease. We have some imaging markers and tracers that we can do PET scanning and see it in the brain. But the disease itself requires really a multi-pronged approach. We need to attack all these different pathways. And this is my collaborator, Dr. Daniel Lee. He actually made this new discovery a couple of years ago when he showed that one of these proteins, a tau protein, has a new modification. And he started to do very simple experiments that we do in our lab. We take a protein and an enzyme, and we see how the protein changes. And he discovered that this new modification is actually found. It's called citrullination, is new, is irreversible, which means that once it happens, it can never go away. In difference from the research so far believed that a lot of those modifications could change, and it was hard to trace when it was there and was not there. Once this happened, this is irreversible, and we can trace it. The thing that we do in our lab is that we work with cells and we work with mice models, and those are so crucial to actually show that what we found with the enzyme and a protein can actually happen in these mice models that mimic the pathology. And we show that. We show that these mice, and I'll go a bit faster because I only have a couple minutes, these mice truly mimic the pathology. This new discovery that we did in a tube actually exists in the mice and is very similar to what we see to the human protein. We also can do those therapeutic treatments that I mentioned and those modifications. We actually can go in this mouse and put that enzyme on it and show that by increasing the enzyme activity, we can make this mouse much worse. And actually, I want to go, just because I'm a scientist, those arrows really tell you how much worse the pathology can become once we increase that new modification. TDP-43, I did mention that my lab focus on it, is actually the only protein that spans through the different forms of dementia. Latency stands for limbic predominant age-related TDP-43 encephalopathy, and that's Dr. Nelson that actually diagnosed it right here in Sanders Brown and showed that latency is actually the third risk factor for dementia, just under Alzheimer's disease and vascular pathology. So what do I do in my lab? Well, we collaborated with Dr. Lee, and we showed the same thing, that if we took that enzyme, and these are actual pictures of the protein, by the way, from the work that we do in the lab, and we put the TDP-43 protein there, we get this big aggregate of TDP-43 that is that big. And when we do that new modification, we make it that small. And we too showed, and this is the hippocampus of those mice, that this new modification of TDP-43 does accelerate and forms that pathology that is otherwise also in humans. And this is work, Dr. Lee's and my work is actually the work that from the CART, the Points for Alzheimer's Research Trust, and served as a seed money for us then to go and get a $3.1 million grant based on this idea that this discovery of TDP-43 modifications could potentially give rise to novel pathology. And why is that important is because we actually now know the enzyme, we know the substrate, we've done the groundwork to try to go and target it in humans. Because again, Alzheimer's disease is a mixed dementia. We have in Alzheimer's disease TDP-43, and if you see, we have tau, which is in green, and we have TDP-43. And when you put those two diseases together, which is 30% of Alzheimer's disease patients, then you are going to have both pathologies in there. I'm going to skip over this, but I wanted to leave you guys with the diagnostic marker to kind of bring home that message that, yes, why we're doing this work is because, if I go one back, as we can measure tau and amyloid beta in CSF, in spinal cord, in PET scanning, in our blood, we can also now develop strategies to measure those things for tau and TDP-43. And I'll leave it here. Thank you very much.
So great. Thank you so much. Linda, will you be available for if anybody has any questions? Do we have time for one question? Will you be available for questions if anybody has?
Absolutely. I'll be here after this meeting and take any questions and talk to anybody.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your work.
you.
And on behalf of the Rotary Club of Lexington and our very own Bill Strauss, we have a lithogram of a beautiful scene in Horse Farms. Please
Thank you
enjoy.
so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. We are adjourned. Don't forget to sign the waiver for the parade this Saturday. Drinks on me. We are adjourned. The old switch it on. I even went through the process of doing it, but I didn't even look to see if the damn thing was on. Right. You're right. Okay. Yeah. And look to see if it's turned off. Good work, sir.